Today I'll be going over Chapter 2 of Nancy Rook's book, Inside Graceland. Chapter 2 is titled, Learning My Way Around. Nancy returned to work on her second day feeling excited and curious and eager to see what the new day would bring. When she got to Graceland, she began with the usual dusting and cleaning and putting things in place. Then later in the day, when she was in the kitchen helping Daisy, Priscilla walked in. Nancy was struck by how petite and pretty Priscilla was, and she seemed so young to Nancy. Nancy writes, "We exchanged pleasantries and I introduced myself. I noticed even though she was polite, she was a little more reserved than the other members of the family I had met the day before. I remember she was dressed in dark slacks and a light-colored blouse. Her dark hair was long and curly." Elvis and Priscilla had only been married a few weeks by then. She was there to help make her new husband's breakfast. Nancy helped Daisy make Priscilla's breakfast first. She had French toast, a poached egg, bacon, and a cup of hot tea, which Nancy learned Priscilla would take with 1 teaspoon of sugar and a little milk. Nancy says, "It took me several times and several tries before I got the blend of milk and tea to suit her, but I finally got it right." Elvis wanted his breakfast sent up to the room, so after Priscilla finished her breakfast, she began helping the maids with Elvis's. Nancy writes, "She did some of the cooking and then carried part of the food for me on a separate tray as the two of us made our way up the back stairs to the second floor and entered his bedroom. He was pleasantly surprised when she entered the bedroom with me carrying part of his food. She was determined that she wanted to be the best wife for him that she could be, and that included learning what foods he liked for his meals." By Nancy's second day, she was already feeling comfortable in the mansion and settling into the rhythm of the job. There wasn't a set schedule, just the simple expectation, as Aunt Delta and Vernon had told her, to do whatever needed to be done. About a month after Nancy was hired, Daisy took time off for a funeral, but ended up staying out a few days after the funeral. Nancy later learned that Aunt Delta and Priscilla felt Daisy had already been taking too much time off for various reasons. Nancy writes, "The day she returned, she was doing something in the kitchen and I was helping her. I had just taken Elvis and Priscilla's food to them in the dining room and had walked back into the kitchen and began talking with her. Priscilla came into the kitchen and, in front of me, told Daisy that her services would no longer be needed and that she could pick up her final paycheck immediately from the office. Daisy started crying and went into Dodger's room asking if there was anything she could do to help. Dodger gently told her she was sorry, but she had no authority over the hiring or firing decisions. Nancy feels that if it had been up to Dodger, Daisy would have been able to stay because the two got along well. But Dodger was not about to go against Elvis and Priscilla's decisions. From what Nancy remembers, Daisy left the house immediately and never returned. After Daisy took off, Priscilla pulled Nancy aside and told her she would be the new cook on top of her other housekeeping duties, and she'd be working alongside the other daytime cook, Mary. Within a month, Nancy had moved from just the housekeeper to cook, and although she was sad about Daisy's departure, she later realized it allowed her to grow closer to Elvis and the family. Nancy writes, "There were always changes taking place where the household staff was concerned. Over the years, Elvis employed a number of different cooks. Alberta, whom Elvis teasingly called Alberto VO5 after the shampoo, had been the first cook/housekeeper for the Presley family. She had been hired when the family lived on Audubon Drive and had moved with them to Graceland. Eventually, Pauline was brought on board along with Mary, Lottie, and me. Over the years, various people worked there on and off, since maintaining a household that operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, required many staff members and considerable coordination. Nancy was determined to learn everything she could as quickly as possible to keep things running smoothly. Over time, she took on many different roles at Graceland, learning what was expected to keep both the house and its surroundings looking their best. Through repetition and experience, she developed an instinct for what worked well and what didn't in maintaining the home smoothly. Nancy writes, "One of my most enjoyable tasks was cleaning and maintaining the trophy room. It represented so many of the accomplishments Elvis had earned. I spent numerous hours cleaning all of the trophies, awards, presentations, and framed certificates, and would find myself totally immersed in the various awards as I read them, one by one, while cleaning them. His jumpsuits were also stored in the trophy room in the late 60s, and I enjoyed taking care of them as well. It was an honor to be so closely involved with some of Elvis's most prized possessions, and to be entrusted with their care. Speaking of possessions, Nancy almost damaged one of Elvis's more expensive ones. One day, Aunt Delta asked her to clean and dust the chandelier above the dining room table. Being very careful, Nancy removed her shoes and placed a towel on the table that she could stand on, and then she began cleaning the chandelier. She started with each light on the first stem and determined that the easiest way would be to stand in one place and turn the chandelier as she cleaned each stem. Nancy writes, "By the time I got to the last stem, I was feeling pretty good about my method of cleaning when suddenly I felt the weight of the chandelier starting to slip down ever so slightly. Within several seconds, it began slipping even more until finally I had my arms under it, fearing the whole unit was about to fall out of the ceiling. I began screaming, which brought Mary running into the room. Upon seeing me, she ran outside the front door and got George Coleman, the resident electrician, who happened luckily to be doing some work on the front of the house. He ran in, took one look, and jumped up on the opposing side of the table and began rotating the entire chandelier in the opposite direction. Nancy later learned that the chandelier hadn't been securely fastened, and while she was turning it to clean, she was unintentionally loosening it from the ceiling. George fixed the chandelier and told her it was the largest and most expensive one in the house. He also emphasized how fortunate she was that it hadn't fallen, since its weight could have seriously injured her. Elvis had been asleep upstairs during the incident and never heard any of it. George reassured her that if no one had been hurt, Elvis likely would have laughed it off, but she was relieved he never found out, and she never cleaned the chandelier that way ever again. Nancy writes, "I've thought many times over the years how fortunate I was to have had a job for so long that I truly enjoyed. In the 10 years I worked at Graceland while Elvis was alive, I also continued working there after he died, I only missed 5 weeks of work due to a thyroid operation. Just about every day was fun." Nancy would do anything they needed her to do around Graceland. Sometimes she'd help Aunt Delta collect eggs from the hen house in the yard, or she'd paint around the house, answered phones, and took clothes to the dry cleaners. She remembers, "More than a few heads turned when they would see me carrying in one of Elvis's jumpsuits to Mr. Acker at Whitehaven Cleaners." She'd also babysit Lisa and wash and wax Elvis's cars, and even hemmed Elvis's pants on occasion while he was still wearing them. "He would stand on the third step leading up the back stairway from the kitchen while I hemmed them." Nancy said some of her most meaningful moments were simply being present for Elvis when he needed someone to talk to. Despite his fame, he was human and sometimes just wanted someone to listen, and she felt fortunate to be that person at times. Nancy writes, "I would be cleaning away in his upstairs office, and he would come into the room, slump down on one of the couches, and just start talking to me about something that was bothering him. Sometimes he would start ranting about how someone was taking advantage of him, or about a particular problem he was having with another of his employees. Most often, however, he would just want to talk about things in general. Another frequent topic concerned religion, and on several occasions we spent several hours discussing his thoughts about death and heaven. He truly believed in an afterlife and shared with me one time, seated in his bedroom, what he thought it was going to be like to see his mother again after he died. He told me on several occasions that he wanted to die on August 14th, the same day his mother died. I would later marvel at how close he came to that day. We shared several such private times together, and I cherished those memories." She treasures the years that she spent in the kitchen at Graceland, where she gained unique insight into the food preferences of Elvis. She notes that, like anyone else, he had favorite dishes as well as foods he disliked. Elvis strongly disliked fish, particularly its smell, and she quickly learned never to suggest it as a meal. As a result, fish was only prepared when he was away touring or filming in Hollywood, and even then, it had to be cooked several days before his return to ensure the smell was completely gone from the house. Despite the fish thing, she says Elvis was very easy to cook for. He liked a lot of simple Southern-style dishes, meaning lots of butter, gravy, and grease. He loved fried chicken, meatloaf, roast beef, lasagna, and other hearty-style meals served with creamed potatoes, peas, green beans, corn, tomatoes, and other vegetables, all served in large portions. And yes, she says the stories of fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches and large cheeseburgers and fries and giant bacon sandwiches are true. Nancy writes, In short, he loved to eat, especially in the later years, and some may say, unfortunately, he had the luxury and the means to have all that he wanted. From the first time I started cooking for him, I became concerned for his health. Watching him eat the rich, fatty foods he would have us prepare for him. A typical breakfast would consist of lots of king cotton bacon, sausage, eggs, toast, coffee with sweet and low and half, and orange juice. She writes, being concerned that he was eating way too much greasy bacon, I once tried to take several strips of it off his plate before taking it up to his bedroom. He had been watching me on the monitor in his bedroom, and when I walked into his room, told me not to do that. She explained she was just concerned about his health. Elvis told her, I need it for energy to keep up with my demanding schedule, and I have a lot of people depending on me. She tried. Elvis loved sweets too, Nancy says. In fact, he probably enjoyed sweets more than anyone I've ever known. Unlike a lot of people with a sweet tooth, he wasn't so much into eating cookies or candy, although he did have a fondness for Reese's peanut butter cups. Instead, he would, for example, consume in one sitting large quantities of homemade icebox pies. Banana cream, chocolate, and egg custard were his favorites. He would also eat numerous popsicles or ice cream sandwiches at one time, as well as homemade cakes of just about any description as long as they were made like Gladys had made them with lots of sugar. He also loved watermelon and cantaloupe, and we would keep, especially in the summertime, large bowls of those two fruits cut up into small bite-sized pieces in a refrigerator that he had upstairs. Nancy says Elvis would try several diets that were popular, especially in the mid-1970s. At one point, he briefly became interested in a popular California health food diet, which involved eating specially prepared diet foods shipped from a health food store in Los Angeles. I wonder what diet that was. Elvis was so confident the diet would help him lose weight that he had Aunt Delta order large quantities of the frozen health food. When it arrived, there was so much of it that the freezers at Graceland didn't have enough room to store it all, so Aunt Delta asked Nancy to store some of it in her freezer at home, and she did. Nancy writes, of course, Elvis quickly tired of that diet and moved on to other things, forgetting about the diet food from California. I still have empty bags of it stored in my deep freeze. I can't bring myself to throw it out. As time went on, Nancy assumed increasing responsibility and felt she gained the respect of Aunt Delta, who managed the household's daily operations. Aunt Delta was the central authority everyone relied on to keep things running smoothly, with Vernon's full support. Through her guidance, Nancy learned how everything functioned and fit together at the mansion. Nancy writes, shortly after going to work at Graceland, I was talking with my father-in-law about the house. He told me that when he was younger, he worked as a sharecropper on a farm nearby on Mill Branch in Whitehaven. He said that he used to go to a dentist who, at the time, was living at Graceland, and that the dentist once pulled a tooth that was giving him trouble. He told me that he sat on an outside step leading down into the basement while the dentist pulled the tooth. That was obviously many years before Elvis bought the house. When Elvis moved into Graceland in April 1957, he immediately began renovations, including building the now famous rock wall and installing musical gates. During early repainting work, Vernon hired non-union painters, which led the local painters union, aware that Elvis was a member of the Screen Actors Guild, to organize a picket line outside the property along what was then lightly traveled Highway 51. Vernon had hired union bricklayers to construct the wall, and for a time, a sign at the gate proudly noted that it had been built by union labor. After the earlier dispute, Vernon made sure that any future work on the house was done by union workers. One afternoon, Nancy and Dodger were watching TV in her bedroom when she began telling her about moving into Graceland. Dodger said, we moved to Memphis from Tupelo when Elvis was only 13 years old. We didn't have any money to speak of and had to keep moving from place to place. All that changed when Elvis started his career and suddenly got famous. Elvis had told Vernon and Gladys to find a larger house, one big enough that we wouldn't have to worry about neighbors complaining about the crowds and such. Well, Vernon and Gladys finally found this place, and everyone fell in love with it, especially Elvis. Dodger continued, at that time, a doctor owned the house. There was a church next to the property, and people at the church were using it to keep canned goods stored in. So Elvis bought the house, and we all moved in. Vernon and Gladys took the downstairs bedroom, but Elvis moved into the upstairs front bedroom. I moved into one of the upstairs bedrooms as well. Then, after Gladys passed, I moved here into Gladys's and Vernon's old bedroom. I'm much more comfortable here because I don't have to climb any stairs, and this is where I intend to stay. Nancy says when the house was first purchased in 1957, it looked very different from what visitors see today. The property had been vacant for some time and was in noticeable disrepair. The house had briefly been used as a church, with services held in the front rooms and the mostly unfinished basement used for various functions. When Elvis took ownership, there were still boys and girls signs on two half-bath doors in what is now the hallway leading out of the pool room that connects up the back stairway and into the jungle room on the tour. The back stairway, which is now part of the tour route to the jungle room at Graceland, was originally an exterior staircase leading to a small patio outside the kitchen's back door. The space visitors now know as the jungle room didn't exist when Elvis first bought the house. It began as an open area that was later enclosed and screened in, then fully walled in with large patio-style windows and furnished as a typical den. In the 1970s, Elvis redesigned it into its distinctive Polynesian style, adding green shag carpeting to the ceiling, a waterfall feature, and tropical furniture. He said the room reminded him of his trips to Hawaii, memories that he associated with happy times. The large chair by the waterfall became a favorite napping spot for Lisa as she grew up. It was big enough for her to stretch out comfortably, and they kept a small blanket nearby to cover her whenever she fell asleep there. Nancy writes, "That chair was so large that the far right window as you face it from inside the room had to be removed to get the chair inside. One of the workers, using a screwdriver while trying to force the window casing out of its frame, chipped the window glass, which had to be replaced. It was said that it took several days before Vernon stopped complaining about how much it cost to have that window replaced." Elvis loved the waterfall feature, which had been designed and installed by Bernie Grenadier, Marty Lacker's brother-in-law. But it wasn't used often because it splashed water onto the carpet, leaving staff frequently mopping up the wet area after it was turned on. Nancy explains that the trophy room at Graceland was not part of the original house. The area had once been an open grassy space with two large shade trees located behind the music room near the swimming pool, where Elvis often hosted relaxed summer barbecues. The space was first enclosed to house a slot car racing set that Priscilla had given Elvis for Christmas. Originally, the structure began as a long covered walkway connecting the music room to the pool before eventually becoming the trophy room that visitors see today. Drapes were later installed behind the piano in the music room to conceal the original doors that once opened onto the covered walkway. That former walkway has since been transformed into the hallway known as the Hall of Gold within the trophy room. In the 1960s, Elvis displayed many of his plaques and awards on the walls of what is now the basement TV room. This was before the room was redesigned in the 1970s with its distinctive blue and yellow lightning bolt decor by Linda Thompson. As Elvis received more and more trophies, it was decided to turn the first floor room into a showcase room, hence the trophy room. When Elvis first moved in, the basement was largely unfinished, containing little more than two half baths and open space. Over time, he completed the area, turning it into the TV room, pool room, laundry room, and a bedroom behind the TV room that was used for many years by Charlie Hodge. During heavy rains, the basement would sometimes flood, and Charlie would occasionally step out of bed in the dark and into standing water. His startled screams would echo from downstairs, alerting everyone that he'd forgotten to turn on the lights before getting up. Nancy writes, "Changes were made over time to the first level of the house as well. When Elvis first bought the house, it had a four-car garage attached to it. It remained that way until 1960 when Vernon and Dee got married and moved into Graceland with Dee's three sons, Billy, Ricky, and David Stanley, from a previous marriage. At that time, Elvis converted the garage into a two-bedroom annex with a living room area. The annex was later modified in various forms and, over the years, became home to several of the Memphis Mafia. I think that Priscilla stayed in one of those bedrooms when she flew in from California when Elvis died. Finally, it was updated and had a modern kitchen installed when Vernon moved there in 1978, the year before he died. He had moved back into Graceland from Dolan Street to be closer to his mother, Dodger, and his sister, Delta. Because of his heart condition, being on the first floor of the house kept him from having to climb any steps. He was living in the annex at the time of his death in 1979. The house was frequently updated over the years as needs changed. After Priscilla moved out in the early 70s, her bathroom was remodeled twice, first for Linda Thompson and later for Ginger Alden. Elvis's bathroom was also remodeled. In the late 60s, he used to have his hair trimmed and washed there using an old barber's chair positioned by the small window. During renovations, the bathroom was updated to include a large circular shower. The barber chair was later relocated to the bathroom near the swimming pool in the trophy room. After Elvis had his hair cut, Nancy would carefully sweep up and dispose of the hair to prevent anyone from collecting it and attempting to sell it. Elvis's bedroom was the final room to be remodeled, with nearly the entire space, including the ceiling, covered in dark naga hide. He had once jokingly told her he was even thinking about installing a kitchen upstairs. Elvis said, "That way, I can tell before I get married again whether she can cook." Nancy writes, he kept the bedroom, which had the windows blocked out with heavy drapes, very dark at all times. If you didn't know what time it was before going into the bedroom, you would never be able to tell by just standing in it. It was done that way by Elvis because he lived his life by a completely different timetable than the sun. If he wanted to go to bed at noon, he didn't want to have to worry about the sunlight keeping him awake. Therefore, he kept the room dark all the time and relied on lighting when he wanted the room light. She says the bedroom had regular lamps, but its primary lighting came from the neon tubes installed around the tops of all four walls. Two different colors were used to create a soft, indirect glow that reflected off the ceiling. The recessed neon lights remained on 24 hours a day. She explains that the neon light switch was located on the right wall upon entering his bedroom, near a TV monitor on a table. On that same wall hung a framed plaque displaying one of two poems written for him by his family friend from Tupelo, Janelle McComb. Elvis's large, custom-made king-size bed featured built-in armrests in the headboard. He could pull them out to sit comfortably while watching TV, reading, or eating, and then push them out of the way when he was ready to sleep. When the oversized bed was delivered, the movers had to bend the top mattress and have to maneuver it up the stairs and into the bedroom. They required a signed waiver stating they wouldn't be responsible for any damage, but fortunately nothing was damaged. The narrow turn at the top of the stairs later created another furniture challenge. A long couch had originally been built in place along the back wall of Elvis's office, but one day Elvis decided to replace it. He instructed the carpenters to remove it and take it downstairs to the basement pool room. Moving the sofa turned out to be far more complicated than expected. Because it had been originally built in place and was about 10 feet long, it couldn't fit through the doorway or navigate the tight turn and narrow landing at the top of the stairs to be taken downstairs. Nancy writes, after several attempts and no small amount of huffing and puffing, Vernon finally decided out of desperation to have them cut it in half just to get it through the small passageways and out of the house. So, as would only happen at Graceland, we were all suddenly and unexpectedly greeted while in the kitchen one afternoon by the sound of a chainsaw upstairs cutting a sofa in half. If I had been in any other house besides Graceland, I probably would have been alarmed. The sofa, or should I say sofas, never made it to the pool room. Vernon ended up giving one half to me and another half to one of the other housekeepers. I made good use of it for a number of years in a living room in my house. Aunt Delta redecorated Dodger's room after she passed, redoing it in a pretty pea green color scheme. The kitchen has pretty much remained the same over the years, save for a touch-up here and there. The kitchen was updated with new appliances, replacing the original green and red refrigerators, and the cabinets were remodeled, and the carpet was replaced several times. Plexiglass barriers have been installed to protect the drawers and appliances from tourists who pass very close to them during the tours. Nancy writes, a lot of people don't know that the kitchen and dining room is still used today by Priscilla and Lisa Marie. On special occasions when either or both of them are in Memphis, they will call up and make arrangements to have meals cooked, just like the ones they used to enjoy right there in the mansion. After the last tour of the evening, the pieces of plexiglass are removed from around the cabinets and meals are cooked, just like they used to be prepared and served in the dining room. A cleaning crew then makes sure that everything is put back into its original and clean condition before tours are conducted the next morning. Before the jungle room was added, a small kitchen table stood against the wall where the steps to the jungle room are now. Elvis frequently ate there, often joined by Vernon and Gladys, with the table positioned across from the long kitchen counter that wound through the kitchen. Nancy says the kitchen at Graceland was the true heart of the home, the center of daily life and family connection. It came alive with the warmth of the Presley family gathered around the counter, and she suggests that if the walls could speak, they would tell remarkable stories. That's it for chapter 2. Stay tuned for chapter 3, which is titled Listening and Learning. See you then.